The rain hit the city like a warning that life could change in an instant. And for single dad Daniel Reyes, it already had. He stood under the broken bus shelter, with his cheap work jacket clinging to his shoulders, holding the sandwich he had saved for his only meal of the day. He had worked a 12-hour shift at the warehouse the night before, slept barely 4 hours, and was now on his way to a second job. His stomach twisted painfully, but he told himself it didn't matter. What mattered was making enough money to keep the lights on, to buy groceries for his daughter, and to survive another week. He had known struggle for years, but nothing prepared him for the moment a small, shivering girl stepped out from behind a trash bin, her thin arms wrapped around herself, her eyes trembling with fear and hunger as she whispered the words that would alter the path of his life forever. She didn't ask for money, she didn't ask for shelter, she just looked up at him with frightened eyes and said the simplest, most human thing in the world. She said she was hungry. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and stories that remind us humanity still exists, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. It truly helps these stories reach more hearts. Daniel's first instinct was confusion. Not because a child was hungry, he knew hunger too well, but because of the way she held herself, as if she wasn't used to approaching strangers, as if she feared even being seen. The girl looked no older than 8 or 9, her clothes soaked and far too thin for the approaching winter, and her hair tied in a neat ponytail that had clearly been styled by someone who cared about appearances. Nothing about her matched the streets she was standing in. She didn't look like a runaway, or someone used to surviving alone. She looked like someone who belonged somewhere safe, somewhere warm, somewhere protected. Yet here she was, rain dripping down her cheeks like tears she was too. Exhausted to shed. Daniel didn't hesitate. He didn't pause to think of the hunger clawing at his own stomach or the long shift ahead of him. He simply crouched down, gently placed the sandwich into her small hands, and told her with a warm, reassuring nod that she should take it. The girl hesitated as if no one had ever given her anything freely. Then she took it with trembling fingers and clutched it to her chest before eating it in small, desperate bites, each one making Daniel's heart ache. He didn't know her name. He didn't know who she belonged to. He didn't know that giving away his meal that morning would pull him into the center of a story so unexpected, so heartbreaking, and so transformative that the entire city would eventually hear about it. She ate silently, glancing up at him with wary eyes, and Daniel tried to make sense of her presence. This wasn't a place children wandered alone. It was an industrial district, mostly used by truck drivers and night shift workers. The nearest residential neighborhood was miles away. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. He asked gently if she knew where her parents were, but she only shook her head and whispered that she had gotten lost. Her voice carried a strange mix of innocence and upbringing, soft, polished, taught. Daniel's instincts as a father kicked in. He couldn't just leave her. He couldn't walk away and tell himself someone else would help. He had been the someone else too many times in his life, waiting for a world that rarely cared. So he walked her to the nearest police station, umbrella held over her tiny shoulders even though the rain soaked him to the bone. The officers listened politely, asked routine questions, and promised to look into it. But as they took the girl in, Daniel felt something in her expression that unsettled him deeply, a flicker of panic, of reluctance, of being taken somewhere she did not want to go. She kept her eyes on him until the doors closed, as if he were the only safe thing she had found in a frightening world. Daniel didn't know that within an hour of her arrival, alarms would go off across the city. He didn't know that her disappearance had triggered a private security alert that involved over 60 personnel, helicopters, and unmarked vehicles scanning districts block by block. He didn't know that she was not just any child. She was the daughter of Adrian Lockwood, the elusive billionaire who owned half the city's tech infrastructure, and whose company headquarters overlooked the skyline like a glass empire. But Daniel would learn soon enough, and when he did, his quiet, struggling life would be thrown into a whirlwind he never saw coming. For the rest of the day, Daniel went through work on autopilot. He lifted boxes, checked shipments, and forced his exhausted body to cooperate. But the image of the small girl haunted him. Something about her loneliness struck him deeper than he expected. He knew what it meant to feel abandoned by life. He knew what it meant to be overlooked. He had once lived comfortably, married, employed, strong, until cancer took his wife and medical bills crushed what remained of stability. But he had always held on to his daughter, Lily, a bright 11-year-old whose laughter kept his world stitched together. He wondered if somewhere out there was a parent searching just as desperately for the little girl he had helped. The next morning, he was called to the police station again, this time by name. Daniel assumed it was to answer more questions. He had no idea he was walking into a storm of luxury, security, and corporate tension. When he arrived, he found a line of black SUVs outside, men in suits speaking urgently into radios, and officers trying to maintain order. In the center of it all was a tall man in an immaculate charcoal coat, his face drawn with fear and exhaustion, pacing like a father whose heart had been ripped from his chest. Adrian Lockwood was known for being untouchable, cold, and impossibly wealthy. Yet here, he looked like merely a man terrified of losing the one thing money could never replace. The moment he saw his daughter, who ran to him with a sob of relief, the entire lobby went still. Adrian fell to his knees, pulling her into his arms with a desperation that shattered every rumor about him. Daniel felt an odd sense of warmth knowing the girl was safe, and he quietly prepared to leave unnoticed. But Adrian stood up, turned toward the officers, and demanded to know who had found his daughter, who had protected her, who had helped her when she had been too scared to explain what happened. He wanted the name. Daniel reluctantly stepped forward, expecting a simple thank you and nothing more. Instead, Adrian strode up to him with a raw intensity in his eyes and gripped his hand as if holding on to the last thread of hope he had left. The billionaire asked what he could possibly do to repay him. Daniel shook his head, insisting it wasn't necessary, that any decent person would have helped a child who was lost and hungry. But Adrian looked at him with a mix of disbelief and emotion, because in his world, kindness had become a rare currency. The girl stepped closer to Daniel with a shy, grateful smile, and in that moment, something inside Adrian shifted. He realized that his daughter had found safety not in the arms of wealth or power, but in the compassion of a man society overlooked. Adrian requested Daniel stay for a private conversation, saying it was important. Daniel hesitated but agreed, not wanting to seem rude. Inside a small conference room, Adrian learned more about Daniel's life in 10 minutes than most people ever bothered to ask. He learned about the back-to-back jobs, the constant financial pressure, the devotion to his daughter, and the quiet strength Daniel carried without complaint. The more Adrian listened, the more he felt an unexpected ache, a sense of guilt that a man who had given his child safety had so little. Security himself. Adrian revealed that his daughter had wandered off during a chaotic transition between security teams. She had panicked, feeling ignored in a flurry of adult decisions, and slipped away unnoticed. She had walked miles before exhaustion, hunger, and fear overwhelmed her. Daniel's kindness had been the anchor she needed at her most vulnerable moment. Adrian confessed he could not fathom what might have happened if Daniel hadn't been there. Over the next few days, something remarkable happened. Adrian visited Daniel's workplace, an act that shocked everyone. He didn't come with cameras or press. He came alone, dressed simply, almost humbly. He asked Daniel if he would consider doing some consulting or security support at his corporation. A temporary role, flexible hours, higher pay than Daniel had ever received. It wasn't charity, Adrian insisted. It was an offer based on trust. He valued people who protected his daughter, even unknowingly. Daniel accepted reluctantly, worried about entering a world so different from his own. But his daughter, Lily, encouraged him, saying that maybe good things were finally coming. And soon, Daniel found himself stepping into an office overlooking the city, trying to navigate a life that felt unfamiliar yet hopeful. He became someone Adrian turned to, not just for security matters, but for honest conversations, for grounded advice rarely found in corporate halls. The billionaire's daughter grew attached to Daniel, often visiting him at the office, bringing drawings, asking about Lily, and talking about simple things money couldn't buy. Adrian's staff began whispering that Daniel had brought warmth to a company known for its cold efficiency. But the most emotional moment came weeks later, at a company event honoring employees and partners. Adrian stood on stage and told the story of a single father who gave away his only meal to a lost little girl, not knowing she was the daughter of a man wealthy enough to buy a city block. He described how that small kindness had humbled him, shaken him awake to the things he had forgotten: humanity, gratitude, and the power of simple compassion. Then Adrian did something that left Daniel completely stunned. He announced a new outreach program for children in need, launched in Daniel's honor, and offered Daniel a permanent role leading the initiative, with a salary that would lift him out of poverty forever. The audience rose in applause, but Daniel stood frozen, overwhelmed by emotions. Adrian's daughter ran onto the stage, hugging him tightly, thanking him again for saving her when she needed someone the most. Life didn't magically solve itself overnight. Daniel still faced challenges, still worked hard, still carried scars of the years he struggled. But now he had stability. He had the ability to give Lily opportunities he never imagined. And he discovered something far more valuable than a job or financial support. He found a community, a sense of purpose, and a friendship built on the purest foundation: kindness given without expectation. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us bring more real, emotional stories to life. Before you go, comment below what moment moved you the most. We'd love to hear your thoughts.